Hello and welcome. My name is Jordana Gessler, Vice President of Education and Exhibits at Holocaust Museum LA, the first and oldest Holocaust museum in the United States founded by survivors. We were founded in 1961 by survivors who wanted to create a safe place to display their precious artifacts, to commemorate their family members and loved ones who had perished, and to educate future generations on the important lessons of the Holocaust. Today, the museum continues to provide free Holocaust education to students from across Los Angeles, the United States, and the world, fulfilling the mission of our founders to commemorate, educate, and inspire. Thank you for joining us for today's program, Survival and Preservation in the Minsk Ghetto. During the Holocaust, the creation of ghettos was a key step in the Nazi process of brutally separating, persecuting, and ultimately destroying European Jewish communities. In June of 1941, Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union and under the cover of war, began the systematic mass murder of European Jewish communities. The Minsk Ghetto was established in what is now Belarus after German troops arrived shortly after the invasion in June of 1941. Around 80,000 people, including Jews from nearby towns, were crowded into the Minsk Ghetto. An additional 24,000 German and Austrian Jews were also deported to Minsk. Upon arrival, most were shot or gassed by the SS. From 1941 to 1943, Nazi troops systematically murdered the nearly 100,000 residents of the ghetto. Frida Reizman is one of the only survivors of the Minsk Ghetto and a leader of the Association of Former Minsk Ghetto Prisoners. In conversation with Artur Livshyts, Belarus Country Director for the Together Plan, Frida will share her remarkable story of survival and discuss her ongoing efforts to preserve and teach the history of the Minsk Ghetto. This program is presented in partnership with the Together Plan. We are so honored to have Frida and Artur here with us today, live from Belarus. Before we get started, please note you can always ask some questions either during or at the end of the program. You can do so by seeing the Q&A box on the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Type in your question there and we'll get to it at the end of the program. It is now my pleasure to introduce Deborah Bruner, CEO of the Together Plan.
Thank you so much. Just a few words about the Together Plan charity. The Together Plan empowers communities in the former Soviet Union and Eastern Europe to help themselves. With a current focus on Belarus, we help communities discover what can be achieved collectively, and through a range of pioneering projects, we work alongside community members to develop skills and knowledge while providing the necessary training to build a sustainable future. We help individuals acquire new skills so that they can build programs and develop initiatives. We support and nurture trust and self-determination, so that in time, communities can feel empowered to self-develop with confidence. We send humanitarian aid by road from the UK to Jewish and non-Jewish communities. We have a young adults virtual collaborative network called Youth for Youth, and this is our next generation virtual community. Making History Together is our 6-month-long program of monthly sessions, which shares everything from stories about child victims of the ghettos to the bravery of partisans. We run an archive service where we help people access their family records from Belarus archives. We translate and publish vital memory books, and our Digital Futures project is a collaboration with the Jewish Heritage Network in the Netherlands to digitize every manner of object, document, and image relating to Jewish Belarus, which will be uploaded to a free platform hosted by Europeana, formed to empower the cultural heritage sector with digital transformation. We are working to build a cultural heritage route, putting Belarus back on the world map, in association with and as members of the European Association for the Preservation and Promotion of Jewish Heritage and Culture, and drawing on the abundance of knowledge we amass, we are building an official route with local communities at its heart. Once in place, this accredited and content-rich route will give communities a voice while guiding the global Jewish diaspora back to the ancestral homes they left behind. Through this program, we're working to preserve vitally important sites of Jewish heritage that have never been marked, such as the Brest-Litovsk Jewish Cemetery, the Bruner massacre site, and the Minsk Ghetto. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce my co-founder and co-director, Artur Livshyts, and the very, very wonderful Freda Reisman.
Thank you, Deborah. Good evening for the Belarus part of the world, and good morning for LA, and welcome to Belarus. And thank you for joining us. I want to introduce to you an amazing lady, a very good friend of ours, Frida Reizman, and she will guide us today through the story of the Minsk Ghetto and will tell us what she has seen with her own eyes and what she has experienced as a child. But as she always says, we were not children at that time. We were grown-ups. We were elderly in our mind. So, Deborah, could you put the PowerPoint that we prepared for everyone? And
Give me a moment.
I would like to okay, so just to give you an idea of how what before the war, what was Minsk before the war, what was Belarus before the war. Belarus had 4 official languages before the war, and it was Polish, Russian, Belarusian, and Yiddish. So Yiddish, the Jewish language, was one of the official languages of the country. Of course, communism has reduced the religion, an opportunity for people to practice the religion to a much lower level than before the communism, but there was still Jewish life going on in the country. We had Jewish theaters, we had Jewish schools. What you can see here in photos, that's how the majority of the town looked like. Wooden houses, one-storied houses. The center of Minsk was stone and brick buildings, but most of the territory of Minsk, of the capital, was, as you can see in the photo. And you can see on the right, you can see the old Jewish cemetery, which of course didn't survive, it doesn't exist anymore. But you can imagine how big the community was when you look at this cemetery. Frida, could you tell us how old were you just when the war started, and what was the Jewish life in Minsk before the war? Фридочка, расскажи нам о том, сколько тебе было лет, когда началась война, и какая была жизнь до войны. Что помнишь из еврейского ты?
До войны в Минске было 70% евреев. Всюду слышно было еврейская речь, были синагоги, был театр, были еврейские школы. Мои 2 старших брата учились в еврейской школе. И всюду повсеместно была еврейская речь. И дружили все. И белорусы, и русские, и татаров было много. И все жили под одной, как говорится, крыша под одним небом спокойно.
The Jewish life before the war was quite intense because in almost 70% of the population was Jewish. My 2 older brothers, they went to the Jewish school before the war. There were many synagogues around the town, Jewish schools, theaters. People were talking to each other and living side by side, Jews, Russians, Belarusians, Tatars. So it was a quite peaceful life before the war where people could practice their own religion and people could be themselves. Да, Фридочка, давай дальше. Сейчас мы с тобой поговорим, я расскажу немножко про период гетто, и я немножко начну, хорошо, а ты потом, я у тебя спрошу.
А гетто рассказать?
Да, ты мне расскажи немножко в семье, практиковали вы еврейство, было ли у вас еврейские праздники?
Мои родители, они оба из местечек. Мама из Шацка, отец из Пуховичей. Отец вообще-то был сирота, его мама умерла, когда ему было 1,5 годика. Его растила до 10 лет бабушка. А у мамы было 7 детей там у бабушки. И мама была старшая, и когда отец умер, ей было 15 лет, и она уже стала добывать для всех еду. Все, она была уже за старшую.
Скажи, а еврейские, вы что-то еврейское, вы праздновали, какие-то еврейские?
Мама была очень набожная. Она ходила в синагогу. Она знала все еврейские праздники. Папа тоже знал, потому что до 10 лет он был единственный мужчина. И бабушка его водила в синагогу, он читал молитвы. Он знал все молитвы.
Before we go into the ghetto period, Frida's family was quite religious. Her mom and dad were from different parts of Belarus. There were many children in both of their families. Their parents died when they were quite young, but they went to the Jewish schools. Frida's mother was quite religious, and that's why Frida's family, before the war, they were celebrating all the Jewish holidays. They were keeping the traditions. They were going to the synagogue. They were speaking Yiddish in the family. So it was a quite traditional Jewish family with everything that you would imagine a Jewish family at that time do: celebrate holidays, do the Shabbat, go to the synagogue, have a kosher meals. So it was a normal, I would say, Jewish life. And on the June 28, 1941, when Nazis invaded Belarus, they went through all of Belarus quite quickly. The Soviet Union wasn't prepared to start the war, and there was a lot of bombing. There was a lot of destruction, death. Nazis just marched through Belarus and occupied Minsk quite quickly. And of course, right after occupying Minsk, they have announced decrees for all the Jews to move into the area where they decided to organize the ghetto. And Deborah, you can show us some of the photos further on where you can see this is the war prisoners. This is Russian Soviet soldiers that were captured by Nazis and they led somewhere. This is the center that I mentioned, the Minsk. Some of the Minsk was stone and brick buildings, and that's how it was heavily destroyed during bombing in the first days of occupation. This is also the center of Minsk that you could see the sides of it. And basically Minsk was 80% destroyed during the Second World War. And you could see on these photos how heavily Minsk was bombed, and there was a lot of destruction. And going to the ghetto period, there was a lot of decrees, a lot of rules made by Nazis for the Jews to obey, for the Jews to follow, in order to get to the ghetto. And I want to ask Frida now how her family got into the ghetto. What was the story of her family in the ghetto? And she will guide us through that quite tragic period of her life. Фрида, скажи, пожалуйста, как ваша семья попала в гетто? Что было в гетто? Как вообще вы там оказались? И вот что вот это такое, желтая лапа, почему? Почему этот желтый круг?
Дело в том, что когда отец с матерью поженились, они жили в Шацке у бабушки, и там в 23-м году родился старший брат. Но работы не было в местечке, и они решили перебраться. Папа был очень хороший сапожник, и они решили перебраться в Минск. Они приехали в Минск, сняли на Мясникова улице 2 маленькие комнатки, одна была без окон, окна стояли на тротуаре деревянном, и папа устроился на фабрику обувную, это было рядом. Еврейская школа была рядом, и меня водили в детский сад на Советской Побережной, тоже рядом. Вот. И вот так мы дожили до начала войны.
Frida's family, they lived not far away from the territory of the ghetto that was announced by the Nazis, and the reason they appeared in Minsk because all of her family was living at her father's birthplace in Shatsk, not far away from Minsk, but still not in Minsk. And her father brought the whole family from Shatsk to Minsk, and that's where they were living several years before the war. Да, Фридочка.
В семье говорили только по-еврейски. Братья очень плохо говорили по-русски, потому что они учились даже в еврейской школе. Вот. И я помню, когда брат рассказывал, ну, он пропускал, как все дети из школы, бывало, выгуливал с уроков, и когда бывало придет мама или папа в школу, учительница бывала так, говорит: «Нижги кумен 100 раз, нижги кумен, йоги кумен».
So all her family spoke Yiddish, and her older brother actually hardly spoke Russian or Belarusian. So for them, for the Jewish family, was no other way but to try to survive when the Nazis came, and then when they started to organize the ghetto. Фридочка, расскажи, как была жизнь в гетто, как вы попали в гетто, где вы жили?
Вот когда началась война, наша улица, где мы жили, не попала в район перечисленных немцами гетто. И куда мы переселились, на Витебской улице, это недалеко, возле Немиги, жила папина тетя, семья. Дочка, маленькая девочка, Любочка, она была младше меня, и ее муж, дядя Лыба. И была одна комната, и все, даже на полу негде было спать. Даже на полу поселиться не было где. Но поселились до первого погрома там, на этой улице. Папа тогда спрятал партийный билет, он уже был членом партии, спрятал партийный билет, и первое же мгновение, когда началась война, он до войны хорошо знал Гебелева, они дружили. Гебелев был из Узлян, это рядом. И они встретились и договорились о сопротивлении.
So her family, because they lived outside of the territory of the ghetto, they had to move into the ghetto. And the only way to move into the ghetto was to get to the sister of Frida's father, who was living in a very small room on the territory of the ghetto. And all of them had moved into this small room, and there were like 10 of them living in the same room. And her father, because before the war he was communist, so he hid his documents that he was a communist. And from the very first days of the ghetto, he has agreed with other men in the ghetto, with the leaders of the sort of groups in the ghetto, to start the resistance movement in the ghetto. So Frida's father, from the very first days of the ghetto, became one of the leaders of the resistance movement in the Minsk Ghetto. Расскажи, пожалуйста, что вот это за латы, которые надо было носить, желтые?
Это латы, которые отмечали евреев от неевреев. И на спине, на левой стороне на спине и впереди. Эти застегивались булавками, эти латы, потому что если переодеть, надо перешивать было. не было желтой ткани.
А почему именно круглые? Почему именно круглые латы?
Не знаю, почему они решили.
So the
Или
photo,
что мы отличаемся от Европы.
the photo you see here is the Jews going into the ghetto. Actually, it's an old original photo, but colored photo. And you can see they're wearing yellow patches, and they had to wear yellow patch, round yellow patch in front and on the back. And probably you're used to seeing the Jews in the ghettos wearing yellow stars, but in the Minsk Ghetto and some of the ghettos in Belarus, it was a bit different. They had to wear a yellow patches. No one really knows why the yellow patch. Some people say, you know, the Jews had to wear it for the soldiers to target them easier. Some say they didn't have enough time to make the stars. It's, you know, there's different stories about that. But that's what differed the Jews in Minsk Ghetto and some of the others ghettos in Belarus to the ghettos in other countries. And you can see that here in the photos, the Jews were going out of the ghetto guarded to the forced labor. It was very hard and tough work that they had to do, dig. They had to clear the roads for the Nazi trucks. They were working in different areas, as well as Frida's mother, because the father was mostly holding sort of the front of the resistance movement, but Frida's mother, she was going out for the labor, and sometimes she would take Frida with her. Фридочка, расскажи, как твоя мама тебя брала на работу, куда вы ходили?
И, значит, когда мы попали вот к тете, жили там, это всего было 4 месяца до первого погрома. И первый погром, я помню все в деталях. Я осталась сегодня одна. И со мной вместе был еще в первом погроме Новодворский Миша. И вот, его уже нет живых. И я осталась одна. Я помню все в деталях. Я помню, кто где стоял. Где стояла колонна, а улица была проходная. Выходила голова на Республиканскую, а хвост на Островской. С Республиканской подъезжали машины, грузили и увозили людей. В хвосте выгоняли из домов людей и в хвост. Мама моя, мы все появились в разных местах. Братья мои спрятались под лестницей за досками. Там какие-то доски навалом лежали. И я почему-то оказалась с папой. Или он меня взял, или что. Я этот момент не знаю. Почему я оказалась с папой, а мама оказалась вместе с папиной тетей, с ее семьей, в колонии уже. Но мама была очень находчивая, и она никогда не теряла присутствие духа. И она внутри колонны двигалась назад, внутри колонны двигалась. И когда она увидела, что нас пригнали с папой на Хлебную улицу, я это место до сих пор знаю. Этот камень, теперь его уже нет. Это все, эта колонна. Она ему крикнула: покажи Аусвайс. А папа работал на автозаводе, это называлось тогда Красное урочище, на бойне. И у него было Аусвайс. И когда он показал этот Аусвайс, они освобождали вот этой колонны, да. И выпустили маму из колонны, с ней она взяла еще какую-то девочку лет 17-16, сказала, что это ее дочка. Вот. И нас посадили с левой стороны во дворе хлебзавода. Сейчас эта стена есть. И всех поставили на колени. А тогда шел мокрый снег с дождем. Было очень холодно. И немец ходил и с нагайкой бил по головам всех. И мама, я помню, прикрывала папу, потому что, зная его горячность, своими плечами, чтобы ему не попало это.
Frida says she remembers very well when she was going, when her mom was working at some, was a small, like a little factory that she had to go out of the ghetto and work for, and she always took Frida with her, so Frida could find, she could get some extra food, because there was no food in the ghetto. The difference between the ghetto and, for example, the concentration camp, there's always, because in concentration camp, it was a very small amount of food, but the prisoners were fed. Now in the ghetto, there was no food at all. At some point, there was no wood to heat the houses. There was no water. There was a terrible sanitary conditions in the ghetto. It was very difficult to survive. So the prisoners, they had to run under the barbed wire. And actually what I didn't mention in the beginning, that Minsk Ghetto was barbed wire. It was surrounded by the barbed wire, not by the brick or stone walls as some other ghettos. There was initially an order from the Nazis to build a wall, but somehow they didn't manage it in time, or something happened. So they've surrounded the ghetto with the barbed wire. So people were running onto the, as they call it, the Russian districts, and they were bringing anything out to exchange for food. And a lot of kids were running to the Russian districts, to the non-Jewish districts, to bring some of the food. They were very small, as Frida was 6 at that time, but they were already thinking like a grown-ups. And Frida says she remembers each pogrom. She remembers surviving in each pogrom. Each pogrom was different. So for example, Nazis could drive in and take people from one side of the street and just bring them out, either shoot them on the spot or put them on the cars, drive them out and shoot them outside of the ghetto. But most of the times, the pogroms were done and people were shot right in the ghetto. And then the other side of the street were made to clear up the bodies after the pogrom. And there were 4 big pogroms in the ghetto, and 3 of them Frida survived. And one of the pogroms that she just told about was the pogrom when all of her family appeared in the column, and her mother, and the column was going out to be shot. And her mother remembered, because she was working, and for the Nazis, valuable Jews were the ones who were working at one spot, at one place or another. And she has shouted to Frida's father, because Frida was with her father on a different side of the column. She shouted, "Show them Ausweis, show them the document that you're working, that you're a valuable person, you're a valuable worker." So he showed it to the Nazi soldier, and he was removed from the column. And Frida says they were put to some other place where everybody had to stand on their knees, and Nazi soldiers were going around and hitting everyone with the sticks onto their heads. And it was, Frida says, it was terrible conditions. And her 2 brothers, they were hiding in some other place. And often the Jews in the ghetto made some hiding places, fake walls, fake ceilings. They were hiding under the floor, wherever anybody could hide. And in some pogroms, it happened in such a way that there could be 50, 60 people sitting in a very small hiding place, and very often with very small children, with the babies. And Frida, I mean, I know for the Russian speakers, she might not be, you might not hear what I'm saying and what Frida said, but I just want to save time and give you a bit more information, because I know the story, you know, I've spoken about this a million times, and I just want to save a bit of time and give you much more information. So Some of the pogroms where people were hiding with little babies, and babies would cry, and mothers had to put pillows over the heads of the babies and kill their children in order to save another 50, 60 people who were hiding. Otherwise, if the Nazis would hear the sound, they would shoot everyone, they would kill everyone. Can you imagine what a tragedy for a mother to kill her baby just for the sake of saving another 50, 60, 40, 20 people? It was a tragedy. I want to show you a little piece from the film, which you can find on our YouTube channel, where Frida talks about the park, a central park in the ghetto, where Nazis were killing whole families. Deborah, please give us.
Этот же парк, он был, да?
Скверик был скверик. Здесь маленький был заборчик, даже после войны. Я его хорошо помню, этот скверик. Это же центр гетто был. Но как здесь висели мужчины, женщины, висели, чтобы сказать сутками, то мало. Неделями не разрешали снимать. Я знаю, моей подруги мама, мать 5 детей, 5 махоньких детей у нее было, за что ее здесь повесили. И дети вот здесь вот рядом жили, возле еврейского кладбища, и они видели повешенную мать.
Very, 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 very terrible times. And when Nazis already were sort of feeling that they're being pushed away and then being defeated, they decided to make a plan of a final execution of the Jews, and it also was about the Minsk Ghetto, where Nazis decided to kill everyone. And they used in Minsk, in Belarus, they tested the mobile gas chambers. And those here, by the way, in the photo, you can see the center of Minsk. This building, this is the building of the parliament where Nazis organized their headquarters. And they've started testing those mobile gas chambers, which Frida talks about in the film, which you will see, and just to give you a little bit of information about how terrible that was.
Я слышал, что в Минске впервые немцы применили мобильные душегубки, так называемые, мобильные газовые камеры. Ты вообще как ребенок их видела? Ты вообще представляла, что это такое?
Я их видела вот здесь в первом погроме.
Что это было такое?
Обычные машины. На вид посмотришь, обычная машина. И мы не знали, что это душегубки. А потом уже узнали.
И как это выглядит? То есть садили в них людей?
Да.
Кузов.
В салон загоняли людей. Ну, сколько там? 20-30, я не знаю. Запускали этот газ и все. А вываливали уже трупы.
А куда их выводили?
Их выводили первый погром в Тучинке, остальные в Тростинце.
Just before we move into the after ghetto period, we would like to ask Frida about her escape from the ghetto. How did she survive? How her family survived? I know only one story when the Nazis, when Gestapo came into her little, they were moving from one place to another in the ghetto because a lot of places got through the pogrom and were burned down. The houses were burned down. And they came into the house where the whole family was living. They were looking for Frida's father, and who had escaped just a couple of minutes before the Gestapo came. So he was warned by one of the people in the resistance movement. And Frida, for almost 24 hours, had to stand outside in the freezing cold in the winter with almost no clothing on, outside in a toilet that was outside of the house. And only when the Gestapo soldiers left, she, of course, she fell on the ground. She doesn't remember anything, and she was saved at that very time by the people from the resistance movement. But I would like to ask Frida to tell us the story of her survival. Who saved her? Who was actually saving the lives of the Jews and Jewish children during the ghetto period? Фридочка, расскажи, как ты спаслась?
Я пережила 5 погромов, кроме последнего. Я пережила бесконечное количество облав ночных. Если у ребенка 7 лет отключается сознание от страха, это о чем-то говорит, что я видела реку крови на Обувной, когда она текла вниз с горы после погрома, или когда берутся за ножки ребенка и головой об угол дома, и она разлетается. Вот. Когда после первого погрома мы поселились на Республиканской, кто-то выдал отца, и этот привел прямо к нам в дом, в комнату. Я потом спрашивала у отца, он не знал, кто это был. Вот, Гестапо. Мама успела крикнуть: дети, спасайтесь, никого не выдавайте. Я приняла это все так, как надо, но у меня чири садились, и я не могла обувь одеть, валенки. Это была зима, было страшно, тяжелая зима. Но я выскочила в коридор, и в проеме дверей была открыта дверь. Я вижу часовой. Когда он ко мне лицом был, я стояла. Когда он повернулся задом ко мне спиной, я выскочила в начале 42-го года, и еще во дворах были туалеты и сараи.
Фридочка, а ты расскажи, как ты вообще
Вот.
спаслась из гетто?
И я выскочила. Подпольщики где-то сидели, они наблюдали, и они видели, что я выскочила. Взять меня днем они не могли. Когда уже начало темнеть, они меня забрали. Этот момент я не помню, очнулась я уже в комнате под кроватью под какими-то корзинами. Отец, совет принял решение, чтобы отец ушел из Минска. И когда он позвал маму, я эту явку, до сих пор она стоит. И никто об этом не говорит, об этой явке возле дома моделей во дворе. Я ее помню, они были 2 дома разбитых. Когда свистнули, опустили лестницу, мы поднялись. И папа сказал, что завтра я ухожу из Минска. Числа я тогда не знала, теперь я уже знаю из архивов, что это было 9 апреля 1942 году. И он забрал старшего брата с собой. До 1943 года, до лета 1943, июнь, мы ничего не знали о них, ничего. И в одно прекрасное время, когда мама работала во дворе Дома правительства, к ней сумел подойти белорус и сказал, что я от твоего сына, я тебя вывезу. Мама не была похожа на еврейку, но она плохо говорила по-еврейски, по-русски. А она говорит: Вывези вначале дочку. Среднего брата уже не было. Он лежит в тростинце. Вывези, она не похожа на еврейку. Она белая, голубоглазая. И они договорились, где мы будем ждать, и он. И когда она мне сказала, что завтра ты уйдешь из Минска, разговора и расспросов не было. Тогда было все умно, толково, и все понималось.
If Frida wouldn't, I mean, Frida says about the terrible stories of how the Nazis were killing the children in the ghetto. They didn't even use the bullets during the pogroms. They would just take a child and they would just smash by the foot, and they would just smash against the wall. And the torture and the horror that was in the ghetto during pogroms and on everyday basis was quite terrible. After the story with Gestapo coming into the house and searching for Frida's father, and when she was saved by the resistance movement in the ghetto, her father and her one of the brothers, they left the ghetto. They escaped the ghetto. They ran away because they were leading the movement outside of the ghetto, and they joined and organized a partisan group, and they were trying to help to bring more Jews out of the ghetto with the support of the Belarusians. And when in 1943, in the summer of 1943, when through the Frida's father, her mom came to Frida and said, "Tomorrow we are going out." There was no questions. They were silent. They didn't talk about it. And on the next day, they ran away through the barbed wire, and Frida went first, and then her mom escaped after. And Frida was taken out by a farmer who has saved actually over 15 people from the ghetto. And Frida says, "I don't even know his name. We tried to find his name and him after the war, and Nazis have killed him because he was saving the Jews from the ghetto." So Frida and other children were taken to the village outside of Minsk called Perechia, where 40 Jewish children have survived the war, and the people from the village were hiding under the threat of the death, were hiding Jewish children. You can also see a film about the Perechia on our YouTube channel, where the story of Perechia is being told. And I know that we're getting to our timing, so I want to give you a little bit of a overview of how the life was after the ghetto, after the escape. And of course, so much wasn't spoken about during the Soviet Union, and only after the fall of the Soviet Union, there was a possibility to tell the story of the Holocaust, to start openly talking about that. But during the Soviet period, there was no opportunity for the Jews to tell the story of the Holocaust, to tell the story of the ghetto. And I just want to ask Frida, what was the life like after the ghetto, during the Soviet period? Фридочка, скажи, во время после гетто, во время советского периода, какова была жизнь для евреев? Что вообще было?
Никакой. Как молчали, такие и до сих пор молчат. До сих пор молчат. Обо всех будут говорить, но только не об этом. Вот я покажу. Мой отец, один из участников сопротивления. Вот он. Вот. Вот.
Frida is showing her father. He was one of the
Вот.
leaders of
Это
the
выпустила
resistance
мастерская историческая.
movement in the ghetto.
Вот. Ни одного слова. Он основатель первого боевого отряда на Минщине имени Кутузова. Ни одного слова. До сих пор стоит гриф «секретно».
unfortunately, there was no, during the Soviet period, and even by very, very recently, there was no war talking about the resistance movement in the ghetto, about the leaders of the resistance movement, Frida said. During the Soviet period, for the Jews, it was very difficult to get a decent job because they were Jewish, get into the university. Right after the war, it was quite difficult because of the anti-Semitism, the state anti-Semitism. But that's a completely different subject. And of course, the life of the Jews was quite difficult during the Soviet period, especially right after the war. But interestingly enough, what you see on the photo here is an obelisk, is the monument that was erected in 1947, which was erected and built on the money that the Jewish community has collected after the war. So the Jews came back, whoever survived, whoever was able to run away to the east, they came back. They've collected the money throughout the Jewish community, and they've erected a monument in the memory of the 150,000 Jews that were killed in the ghetto, and specifically in the memory of over 5,000 Jews that were thrown into this pit, which you see in the photo, during the pogroms in the ghetto. And one interesting thing about this monument is that it had a writing in Yiddish. And right after erecting this monument, an architect and a person who has written the Yiddish words have been sent to the Gulag, to the Stalin's camps, for doing that, for actually admitting on the monument that it is in the memory not of the Soviet citizens that usually you could see throughout the country, but in the memory of the Jews. Of course, they were rehabilitated after Stalin died. That's how this place looks now. And of course, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, there was more freedom to talk about the history. There was more freedom to put the Jewish monuments in place. This is a new monument you could see at this sort of Yama memorial. And of course, there is more now information. There is more information. There is more history about the place. What you can see in the photos, this is the Trostinets camp. This is a memorial to not just the Jews, but the majority of the over 200,000 people that were executed in Trostinets were Jews, and that most of them were from Minsk Ghetto. So here you could see some of the photos of this place. And there's a little piece of the film, again, that we would like to show you, where Frida talks about the place and talks about her brother.
Фрида, дорогая, расскажи нам про это место, куда мы сейчас приехали. Как твоя жизнь, твоя судьба связана с этим местом? Я смотрю, что здесь вот написано, что вот на этих вагонах, на таких вагонах привозили евреев. Но это, наверное, привозили евреев из Европы.
Из Европы.
Называемых гамбургских.
Угу. Их привозили сюда и здесь убивали. А маленьких детей, как нам рассказывали люди, которые здесь жили, крестьяне, маленьких детей на штыки и в яму, на штыки и в яму. Вот. А наших гетто здесь лежит все гетто, кроме первого погрома. Первый погром лежит в Тучинке, а остальных сюда привозили мертвых уже.
То есть их уничтожали либо по дороге, либо в гетто?
Либо в гетто, да. И здесь уже они мертвые. Их всех спалили, как я понимаю. Их всех спалили.
То есть здесь их сжигали, здесь их сжигали.
После войны ЧГК работала и вывела такую цифру: 256 тысяч здесь человек погибло. А из них больше половины Минского гетто евреев. Больше половины. Здесь лежит где-то пепел моего брата, среднего, ему было всего 16 лет.
I know it's very difficult to squeeze such a tragic story and several years of very intense actions and the history of the Jews before the war and after the war into a very short talk, but you can always go onto our website and our YouTube channels. You can see the stories and you can see the history of that period. And what's interesting that Frida herself, she never left Minsk. She decided to live in Minsk, and she's kind of a guardian of the ghetto, because people often ask her, why are you still living? I mean, that's very unique. Why you still live in the territory where you were executed, your people were executed? And what Frida says, my relatives, my family lies in this land and in the ground. I will never ever leave them. And another reason is God saved me to tell the story of the ghetto, to continuously tell the story of the tragedy and of the Holocaust, in order for the future generations to remember, and in order for this not to happen again. And throughout 30 years, when Frida was actively involved in a Jewish community building, she was publishing the books in Russian. She was publishing articles. She was giving speeches in the schools. She was giving speeches at the big organizations. She was promoting and publicizing that tragedy and the story of the Holocaust in Belarus. And I have to say, she is an activist. She continued the work of her father, but her father was fighting for the Jews to be free, and she is fighting for the whole world to be free of Nazism and for the whole world not to repeat this mistake again. And we have an honor, and we took on her initiative to publicize this story around the world and around the English world. And several years ago, we have published a book called We Remember, a book of the memories of the Minsk Ghetto survivors. This is the first ever English publishing with the collection of the stories of the survivors of the Minsk Ghetto. We've done the presentation launch of the book in Minsk that was hosted by the British Embassy. And you could see the faces of those survivors. That was the moment of a historical moment. It was a moment of their life where they could go out on the stage and tell their story to the world. And when they knew that their story will be announced around the world, they were so proud, they were so honored to do that. And Frida always says that it's not the beauty that will save the world, it's the kindness that will save the world. And each person who is being kind to the history and to the heritage of the Jews, I'm talking about Belarus now, puts a little input into the story of this part of the world, when once has been a very developed Jewish place, a center of the Pale of Settlement. And we're honored as an organization to continue telling the world about the amazing heritage of the Belarus. And we're trying to tell the world about the interesting story, not just about the Holocaust. We do a lot with the European Association of Preservation and Promotion of Jewish Heritage. We do a lot of filming, showing. One of our remedies is to tell the world about the heritage of the Jewish Belarus and the heritage of the Jewish community of once, as I said, very developed Jewish area, Pale of Settlement.
Праведникам памятник, аллея праведникам мы, и ни одного деревца не посадило государство.
The Frida has also, she's mentioning that they've done the alley of the trees in the memory of the righteous Gentiles of the world, the people who were saving the Jews. She's trying to promote that that direction as well, because Belarus itself had hundreds and hundreds of the righteous Gentiles of the world, people who were saving the Jews during the Holocaust. And we're trying to remember everyone, and whoever has been given the title of the righteous Gentile in Israel by Yad Vashem, we always try to remember these people in their own country. And we try to talk about this, we try to publish articles about that, and we try to erect the monuments to the righteous Gentiles of the world.
Даже на 150, как говорят официально, погибло в первом районе, в Тучинке, не было памятника. И поставили дома на кладбище, и только камень поставили через 10 улиц.
So Frida has been criticizing the state for not doing a lot beforehand, for not erecting the monuments, for not remembering, for not trying to bring that story for it to be more publicly, and for not erecting the monuments, or for building over the cemeteries, building over the places of execution. But that's how it was in the Soviet Union. But currently, with the support of the community, with the support of the world community and the Jews around the world, we're managing to put back the Jewish Belarus on the map, and to remember those people, and to remember the Jewish community, remember the tragedy, and trying to bring the memory back through the monuments, through building memorials, through putting information out, through education. And together with Frida, we have a long way to go, but I'm sure we'll manage that, and we'll be able to tell the world more about Belarus.
То, что мир сегодня знает о Минском гетто, это только мы помним. Я говорю, что меня Бог спас, вывел из гетто и дал поручение рассказать это людям, чтобы такого не повторилось ни нашим детям, ни нашим внукам и дальше.
What the world knows about the Minsk Ghetto now, today, is just because of us and because of our work. And I know that God has saved me, and God gives me health in order to continue telling the story, for this tragedy not to repeat again in the future. Спасибо. Сейчас мы на вопросы ответим.
Еще я хочу сказать, как бы мне не было плохо, мои годы большие, ползком, лежа, сидя, я буду ходить, я буду ползти, но я буду рассказывать людям, чтобы этого не было.
Frida says, irrelevant of my health conditions, whether I have to crawl or sit or lay down, I'm going to be telling this story. I'm going to be telling this story for the sake of this, not to repeat again. Thank you. Спасибо, спасибо,
И я
Frida.
выполняю поручение Бога.
Thank you, Spasiba. Thank you so much for that incredible presentation. I know we're nearing the end of our hour, but I just wanted to give a few questions from the audience an opportunity to ask Frida via you, Artur. Thank you so much for all of your work. So there were a few different questions from the community about life after the war. What was Frida's relationship like with her neighbors after the Holocaust? Did she meet any, collaborators who worked with the Nazis? Were any of the perpetrators brought to justice?
Um,
Artur, you're muted.
Yeah, I just want to, I'm sorry, because Frida is not hearing well, so
Okay.
we have to communicate, and sometimes I have to speak a bit louder. I mean, she gets my voice, but I just want to clearly explain to her what the question is. So I'll mute myself, I shout, and then we go back to normal. Фрида, скажи, пожалуйста, жизнь после войны, да, вот с соседями, как были отношения, потому что ты была еврейка, Какие-то коллаборационисты, которые еще оставались после войны, были ли какие-то случаи?
Они и
Вообще,
сейчас есть.
Мгм.
И сейчас есть потомки полицаев. И я хорошо на своей семье почувствовала, что такое полицаи и оставшиеся после войны вся эта когорта. Мой муж очень был талантливый музыкант, скрипач. Вот он видел, он учился в одном классе с Лученком, со смольскими композиторами известными. Не их печатали в газете, а его печатали, как одаренного скрипача. Я поступала, я очень любила английский язык. И я поступала в Иньяс. Мою подругу приняли, хотя отец у нее был полицай. А меня нет, сказали национальные кадры.
It was quite difficult after the war for the Jews, and of course collaborators and the people who were in police during the, and you know, their relatives, their families themselves, they survived the war and they were living as neighbors, and it was, and we knew them, but it was sort of quite difficult to sort of adjust because, for example, my husband, he was a very talented musician. And when there were publishings in the newspaper about the musicians, about sort of the culture, about the music, often it wasn't published about him because he was a Jew. When I decided to enter the university, I wanted to go to the linguistic university, and I was denied when my friend, whose father was in the police during the war, she was admitted to, she was taken into the uni and she could go to the university. So a life for the Jews after the war was quite difficult because of, I think, the legacy after the war and the anti-Semitism.
Я хочу сказать, что и сегодня это в той же мере. Вот я принесла историка, профессора, когда он пишет о моем брате, единственный в Советском Союзе подорвал 17 эшелонов. И он не герой Советского Союза, и его не вспоминает всех рядовых, но там евреев нет.
Even now, her brother, he has blew up 17 Nazi trains when he was in partisans, and he wasn't given a title of the hero of the Soviet Union. Even by now, he wasn't admitted. Even now, the historians write about other heroes, but not about Frida's brother. So this this historical sort of mistakes that were made and unfairness, we were trying to admit, and we as an organization and the community are trying to bring the memory of those heroes back. And I have to say now we're able to do that, and we in Minsk now, together with the education facility, together with the government, we're trying to build a memorial park, and we're going to be putting a small monument, benches, in the memory of the heroes of the ghetto, of the righteous Gentiles, and of the people like Frida's father, Frida's brother, and we're going to put information on those benches, and we're going to tell the world about the story of the fighters in the ghetto. It's often considered that Jews were not fighting. The Jews were just blindly going to death, and Jews were obeying the order. That's false. That's not true. Jews were fighting, and fighting very well, and we'll bring this story up. We'll tell the world about this story.
Это страшно. Это
Yeah, Frida
страшно.
says this is terrible what was happening during the Soviet period.
Но здесь лежат все мои родные. И я никогда не уеду. Я буду с ними до конца.
As I said, Frida says she will never leave this country. She will never leave this place because all her relatives, everyone is here, and she will be with them until the end of her life.
Даже 10 родных у меня не осталось.
Everyone, you know, all her family, most of her family was killed during the Holocaust. Any other questions?
There was a question from the audience about what year Frida was born.
Фридочка, в каком году ты родилась?
Ой, это страшно. Вот это страшно. В 35-м.
That's scary, she says, 1935.
86.
She's 86. She speaks English herself. Great.
Ну вот.
This whole time she's been just making you work for it, Artur. She understood it the whole time.
I know. I mean, she speaks. That's why she want. Look, she said she wanted to go to the linguistic university. How? So she knows how to speak foreign languages.
Скажи, что я 2 года не могу попасть к Качановой.
Это хорошо.
Сучки.
She said she's trying for 2 years. She said she's getting to the senior members of the government, and she's going to tell them what they're doing wrongly, and she's going to tell them what they need to do to admit the history of the Holocaust and to remember the heroes of this country.
Она принимает 17, а я получаю приглашение 20-го.
So I know that she mentioned she would remain in Belarus because that's where her family is buried and that's where they lived. But was there a decision made shortly after the Holocaust about staying in the Soviet Union? I know there weren't that many options for people to emigrate, but was that a choice that they made to stay, or was there really no choice to be made?
Well, maybe I'll respond to this because there was no option to leave because there was division between 2 blocks, the Western Bloc and the Eastern Bloc and the Soviet Union, and people were not able to leave the Soviet Union, so they had no chance. Only in 1970s where dissidents have started to refuse from a Soviet citizenship and fight for their rights and freedom of immigration. Only at that time, the first waves of immigration, when the Soviet Union during the Brezhnev period were allowed to leave the country, that was the start of the immigration. Before that, it was not even dangerous to even sort of try to leave, but it was dangerous to even think about leaving. And a lot of people were corresponding with the relatives who left before the revolution, before the war, and it was dangerous to write letters to each other because it was all controlled by the Soviet KGB. And that's how families separate. That's how family had to live without each other for 70 years of communism. So the response to your question is it was impossible to leave.
You speak in Yiddish?
No.
No. Nicht.
And ice?
Nicht.
I think it's quite important just to say one thing. In the PowerPoint, we had pictures of people wearing the yellow patch. And it was when we translated the book that no one spoke about wearing a yellow star. They all mentioned in Yiddish, "Eilata," which is a Yiddish for the word patch. And so we did some research, which is when we found that picture. Well, we found the one patch of all these millions of or thousands of patches there must have been. We only found the one that was preserved in a museum. And there is a communique, it's communique number 31 of the security police, which says, as the soldiers cannot always unfailingly distinguish Jewish people from non-Jewish local population, in some cases misunderstandings have occurred. A regulation has therefore been issued requiring that with immediate effect, Jewish men and women aged 10 and older wear yellow sewn-on patches on their breasts and backs at all times. So the idea was to shoot Jews, and they were a target. So it was target. So they knew who they were shooting. I think that's important.
Yeah, I can see also about the questions about the pogroms. It wasn't just Minsk Ghetto where the pogroms took place. Almost all the ghettos had pogroms. It was a Nazi policy. They would come in, they would kill some Jews, they would leave, they would come in again. And actually, interestingly enough, most of the pogroms were done not by the German soldiers. There were a lot of collaborators, Ukrainians, Latvians, Polish collaborators, Lithuanians, who were coming into the ghettos and executing the Jews. And that was very custom practice to do that. And unfortunately, there's not enough information about this as well. But that was the period of time where there was a collaborator groups and even armies in those countries who were supporting the Nazis and who were killing the Jews. So, but to respond to the questions, yes, the pogroms have been going on in all of the ghettos around Belarus. And almost every city and every village in Belarus had a ghetto because almost 70% of the population was Jewish.
Well, I want to thank the Together Plan, and I want to thank you, Artur, and you, Frida, for coming today, and honestly, for all the important and hard work that you do. Although the Holocaust history is vast and complex, and there's so much to unpack and learn, continuing to commemorate and educate in places like Belarus, especially where, as you mentioned, there was a thriving, rich Jewish culture that is mostly lost, is so imperative and important for the future generations to learn from. So thank you on behalf of Holocaust Museum LA. You can see in the comments, so many people were thanking, Frida and Artur for all of the important and hard work, unbelievable, really courageous that you guys do. And thank you, of course, to the Together Plan, Deborah, for bringing this program to us. This has been a really meaningful opportunity for conversation and learning and dialogue. And I know that the individuals who participated today will continue researching and learning more about this important piece of Jewish history.
Thank you.
Они поблагодарили тебя за участие. Спасибо большое, что продолжаешь делать то, что ты делаешь. И спасибо тебе за всю работу, которую ты ведешь.
Come to me in Minsk.
Come
We
to
are
Minsk.
speaking with you about all.
Yeah, Frida is inviting everyone to Minsk, and indeed,
Больше и
indeed, it's
подробнее.
very. I know nowadays it's a bit more difficult, but I mean, in
И
a
я
real.
бесконечно благодарна, что они хотят знать об этой трагедии, что люди не ушли безымянно.
And Frida
Они будут
is
просить Бога за них.
very grateful to everyone who is interested in the story of the Holocaust in Belarus and Minsk Ghetto. And it's very important that people who died, they just didn't die. They didn't die without any notice that you are interested in their story. We remember their story. So they're not gone. They left the legacy behind them, which is quite important for Frida to know that all her hard work, everything she does is being noticed and is being respected and is being known. So that's quite important. And she says that she's very thankful to everyone for listening and to everyone paying attention to the story of Minsk Ghetto.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we sign off for the community, I want to invite everyone to join us on Thursday at 11 a.m. for our weekly Holocaust Survivor Talk. And then, of course, next week, September 9th, for our monthly series, Building Bridges. And this month's series in September will be a community of leaders reflecting on the 20th anniversary of the September 11th attacks. You can always find more information about our virtual events on our website, holocaustmuseumla.org. Also, a recording of this program, as well as our other public programs, are always available at Holocaust Museum LA's YouTube channel. Holocaust Museum LA brings you programs like today's at no charge. If you are enjoying our programs, please consider supporting our work by becoming a member. Member information is available at our website, holocaustmuseumla.org. Thank you again to Frida. Thank you again to Artur. Thank you, Deborah, for this incredible, meaningful program. Wishing everyone who celebrates a happy and sweet new year, and looking forward to continuing our work with you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.